The silence of Blackwood Manor was a living thing, thick and ancient, breathing softly around Eleanor. It was a silence born of generations, of whispered secrets and hushed opulence, far removed from the city's incessant hum. Here, in the sprawling library, even the air felt weighted with history, scented with old leather, dried ink, and a faint, sweet whisper of beeswax polish. Eleanor traced the intricate arabesque of a faded velvet curtain with the tip of her gloved finger. The fabric, a deep, bruised aubergine, was unlike anything she'd ever encountered. It wasn't merely old, it felt insentient, each thread imbued with a memory she couldn't quite decipher, yet could almost taste on her tongue. Her specialty was textile restoration, a delicate art of coaxing life back into forgotten beauty, and this curtain, a formidable challenge, had been brought to her by the enigmatic Mr. Julian Thorne. She had been working on it for weeks, meticulously cleaning, mending, and reinforcing the fragile pile, her portable lamp casting a concentrated pool of light on the section she was currently addressing. The rest of the library, a cavernous space lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes, remained cloaked in shadows, only the occasional glint of polished mahogany, or the distant gleam of a brass fitting hinting at its grandeur. A fire, banked low in the hearth, cast a hesitant amber glow that did little to dispel the gloom, but added a comforting warmth to the cool evening air. Eleanor loved these solitary hours. They were communion, just her and the fabric, a silent conversation across centuries. She could lose herself in the microscopic world of fibers, the rhythm of her needle a soothing mantra. But tonight there was an unfamiliar prickle on her skin, a subtle hum beneath the surface of her concentration. It wasn't the usual exhaustion. It was something else, a heightened awareness that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. She blamed it on Mr. Thorne. Julian Thorne was a man who moved through the world like a shadow, and left an imprint like a storm. Their initial meeting had been brief, formal, yet unnervingly intense. He was a collector, she knew, not just of textiles but of rare books, art, and perhaps, judging by the house, of solitude itself. He possessed an austere beauty, sharp angles and a gaze that seemed to peel back layers, seeing more than she intended to reveal. His dark hair, meticulously styled, framed a face that was both aristocratic and faintly dangerous. He was a man accustomed to commanding attention, even when he merely stood still. She hadn't seen him since that first day, almost a month ago, when he'd ushered her into this very library, his presence filling the vast space. He'd given her free rein, key to the estate, and an instruction to work at her own pace. He'd said he was often away, but she felt his presence even in his absence, a lingering scent of expensive tobacco, and something wilder, like pine needles and damp earth, that clung to the air in certain rooms. A faint creak echoed from the far end of the library, barely discernible above the soft crackle of the fire. Eleanor froze, her needle suspended mid-stitch. Her heart gave a sudden, hard thump against her ribs. She was alone here always. Or so she thought. A tall figure detached itself from the deeper shadows, near the enormous oak door. Julian Thorne. He moved with an almost unnerving quietness, as if his footsteps absorbed sound rather than created it. The sight of him, emerging from the darkness like a creature of the night, sent a shiver racing down her spine that had nothing to do with the chill of the evening. He stopped a few paces from her work table, his hands clasped loosely behind his back. His dark suit, impeccably tailored, seemed to absorb the dim light, making him appear even more formidable. His eyes, the color of aged whiskey, found hers, and for a long moment, he simply watched her. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. There was no surprise in his tone, no apology for his sudden appearance. It was as if he had expected her to be there, expected her to be exactly where he found her. Eleanor swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Mr. Thorne," she managed, her voice a little breathy. She straightened up slowly, feeling acutely aware of the gloves on her hands, the stray wisps of hair escaping her bun, the faint scent of the antique fabric clinging to her clothes. She felt like a trespasser, caught in the act, despite having every right to be there. He took a step closer, then another, until he stood directly opposite her, the work table a silent barrier between them. His gaze dropped to the curtain, then back to her face. "Still at it, I see. It's a particularly challenging piece," she replied, trying to inject a professional calm into her voice. "The pile is quite delicate in places, and the original dye has bled slightly in others. It requires a slow hand." He nodded, a barely perceptible movement. A slow hand for a slow beauty. His eyes lingered on the velvet, and Eleanor noticed a flicker of something in their depths. Not just appreciation, but a deeper, almost possessive reverence. "Tell me," he began, his voice dropping an octave, "what do you feel when you work on something like this? This velvet sin, as my great-grandmother used to call it." The phrase, velvet sin, hung in the air, a silken ribbon of intrigue. It felt impossibly intimate, a glimpse into the Thorne family's private lexicon. Eleanor felt a blush creep up her neck. She hadn't expected him to engage her in conversation beyond the purely logistical. "Sin?" she repeated, a small, involuntary smile playing on her lips. "Because it's so luxurious?" He finally moved, circling the table slowly, his gaze still fixed on the curtain. "Perhaps? Or perhaps because it holds so many stories, so much temptation." He paused, now standing beside her, so close she could feel the faint warmth emanating from his body. "What do you feel, Miss Vance?" His proximity was disorienting. She could smell him now, that unique blend of pine and tobacco, underscored by something subtly musky, entirely masculine. It was intoxicating. Her carefully constructed professionalism began to fray at the edges. I feel a connection," she admitted, her voice softer than she intended. "To the past, to the hands that first wove it, to the lives it witnessed. It's like being a bridge, bringing something back from the brink, allowing it to speak again." She gestured vaguely at the fabric. "It's beautiful, even in its decay." His gaze, warm and intense, was now on her face, making her stomach clench in a peculiar way. "You see beauty in decay. That is a rare gift." His words were a caress, igniting a warmth deep within her. "Most people only see what is broken." Eleanor found herself unable to look away from his eyes. They held a depth that was both alluring and unsettling. "It's not truly broken, Mr. Thorne. Just wounded, neglected. And you are its healer." He reached out, his long, elegant fingers hovering inches from the velvet. Then, unexpectedly, not touching the fabric, but brushing lightly against the back of her gloved hand. The contact was fleeting, barely there, yet it sent a jolt through her, an electric current that made her breath catch. He withdrew his hand almost immediately, but the sensation lingered, a phantom warmth that spread up her arm. "Forgive me," he murmured, though his tone held no true apology. "I merely wanted to feel the texture you spoke of." Eleanor's cheeks flushed hotter. He hadn't touched the Aya fabric. He had touched her. She could feel her pulse quicken, a frantic drumbeat in her ears. It's very soft," she managed, her voice a little shaky. "Even after all these years." She wanted to pull her hand away, hide it, but it felt glued to the table, trembling slightly. He finally laid his fingers on a restored section of the velvet, stroking it with a slow, deliberate motion. "Indeed. Like a whisper against the skin." His voice was low, almost a purr. "It tells stories, you say? What stories does this velvet whisper to you, Eleanor?" The use of her first name, so casually dropped, was another unexpected intimacy. It felt like a subtle transgression, a quiet claiming. Her professional armor, already weakened, crumbled further. I imagine grand balls," she began, trying to regain her composure, focusing on the fabric, soft lamplight, rustling silk gowns, hushed conversations, perhaps a clandestine meeting, a stolen kiss in the shadows it creates. The words flowed out before she could censor them, painting a picture that felt suddenly too vivid, too personal in his presence. He chuckled, a low, rich sound that resonated deep within her chest. "A stolen kiss, you say? You have a romantic imagination, Miss Vance. or perhaps a practical understanding of velvet's true purpose. He leaned closer, his head tilted, his gaze unwavering. It shrouds, it conceals, it invites discovery. The air around them crackled with unspoken meaning. Eleanor felt an intense heat blooming in her core, a familiar yet long-dormant sensation stirring to life. The library, once so vast, seemed to shrink, drawing them into a private sphere. The fire in the hearth snapped and hissed, the only other sound breaking the spell. "Will you join me for a glass of sherry?" he offered, his voice a little softer now, as if sensing her discomfort, or perhaps her burgeoning interest. "You've been working diligently. You deserve a respite." Eleanor hesitated. It was late. She had a long drive back to her small apartment in the city. Her sensible side screamed for her to politely decline, to pack up her tools and escape the escalating tension. But another part of her, a part she hadn't known still existed, was intrigued, flattered, and undeniably drawn to the dark allure of Julian Thorne. "I shouldn't," she began, the words feeling weak and unconvincing even to her own ears. "Nonsense," he countered, a hint of a smile touching the corner of his lips. "It is my house, my sherry, and your company would be a welcome change from the usual silence." He pushed himself away from the table, a graceful, unhurried movement. "Come, let me show you something." He didn't wait for her answer, simply turned and began to walk towards the far end of the library, towards a section she hadn't yet explored. Eleanor found herself following, a reluctant moth to a very dangerous flame. She shed her gloves, tucking them into her tool bag, feeling the cool air on her bare skin. He led her to a tall, carved mahogany cabinet that stood recessed into the wall. It was darker here, the fire's glow barely reaching. Julian Thorne reached for a small brass key he produced from his waistcoat pocket, and with a soft click, he opened the cabinet doors. Inside, bathed in the faint light that seeped in from the hearth, was not a collection of books or art, but a single, breathtaking garment. It was a robe, or perhaps a dressing gown, fashioned from the same rich aubergine velvet as the curtain she was restoring. But this velvet was pristine, vibrant, its pile catching the light with a lustrous sheen. It was embroidered with intricate gold thread, depicting what looked like mythical beasts intertwined with thorny vines. "This," he said, his voice imbued with a rare softness, "was the original. The curtain was cut from the same bolt, commissioned for the master bedroom. But this was made for my great-grandmother, Lady Isolde Thorne, for her private hours." Eleanor felt a gasp catch in her throat. It was exquisite. The craftsmanship was beyond anything she had ever seen, even in museums. She could almost feel the weight of the fabric, the softness against skin. "It's magnificent," she whispered, reaching out a hand, then stopping herself, afraid to touch something so fragile, so personal. "Go on," he encouraged, his voice a low invitation. "Touch it. Feel the velvet. Feel its history." Slowly, carefully, Eleanor extended her hand. Her fingers brushed against the deep pile, and a shiver ran through her. It was impossibly soft, like stroking the fur of a sleeping cat, yet with a dense, luxurious weight beneath. The gold embroidery was cool beneath her fingertips. "It's like liquid," she murmured, lost in the sensation. "Like dark wine, flowing over the skin." He stood very close behind her, so close she could feel the heat of his body, the faint brush of his sleeve against her arm. She could hear the soft, steady rhythm of his breathing, feel his presence like a physical weight. "My great-grandmother," he said, his voice close to her ear, sending another shiver through her, "was a woman of great passions and great secrets. She believed that what one wore in the privacy of one's chambers was more telling than any public declaration." Eleanor turned her head slightly, her gaze meeting his over her shoulder. His eyes were dark and unreadable, yet held an intense heat that seemed to burn into her. "And what did this declare?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He leaned in closer, his lips almost brushing her ear. That she was unashamed of her desires, that she embraced her own velvet sin. His breath, warm and faintly spiced, ghosted across her skin, making her heart pound a frantic rhythm. The air between them was suddenly thick with unspoken desires, with the weight of centuries of secrets and the raw, undeniable pull of the present moment. She could feel the subtle tremor in her own body. A yearning she hadn't realized was dormant, now awakened by his proximity, his words, the intoxicating scent of him. He straightened then, moving away just enough to break the immediate intimacy, though the tension remained, a humming thread between them. "Come," he said, his voice a little gruffer, as if regaining control. "Sherry, and perhaps you can tell me more about Lady Isolde's passions as you perceive them from her fabric." He led her to a small seating area near the fireplace, where two ornate velvet armchairs faced each other. On a low table between them, a silver decanter and two crystal glasses already waited, as if he had anticipated her arrival, or perhaps had been waiting for her all along. He poured the sherry, the amber liquid glinting in the firelight. He handed her a glass, their fingers brushing again, a spark igniting between them. Eleanor took a sip. It was rich, sweet and warming, settling her nerves even as it deepened the exquisite ache within her. She sat opposite him, the fire casting dancing shadows on his sculpted features. He was watching her, she knew, studying her with that unnerving intensity. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet thrillingly alive. The velvet sin of Lady Isolde, and perhaps of Blackwood Manor itself, seemed to wrap around them, drawing them deeper into its opulent, dangerous embrace. The conversation that followed was a delicate dance, a slow unveiling. They spoke of history, of art, of the hidden stories woven into the fabric of life itself. He listened intently when she spoke, his gaze never leaving her face, making her feel as though every word she uttered was precious, every thought significant. And when he spoke, his voice was a balm, a rich melodic sound that resonated through her bones, filling the vast library with an intimacy that was almost unbearable. The sherry warmed her from the inside out, dissolving her inhibitions, making her feel bolder, more reckless. She found herself meeting his gaze for longer and longer stretches, allowing herself to get lost in the depths of his eyes, seeing a flicker of something ancient and knowing there. He asked her about her work, her passion. "You truly believe these fabrics have a soul?" he inquired, leaning forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "I believe they absorb the lives they witness," she confessed, her voice soft with conviction. "The joys, the sorrows, the desires. They are silent witnesses, holding echoes of the past." "Desires," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. His gaze dropped to her lips, lingered there, then returned to her eyes. "And what desires do you believe this particular velvet holds?" He gestured vaguely towards the restored curtain, then to the robe in the cabinet. Eleanor felt a flush rise to her cheeks. She thought of Lady Isolde, of her velvet sin, of stolen kisses and clandestine meetings. She thought of the desire that was now pulsing through her own veins, a direct result of Julian Thorne's presence. "Perhaps," she ventured, her voice huskier than she intended, "it holds the desire for touch, for intimacy, for the soft surrender that comes with trust." He held her gaze, his expression unreadable, yet intense. "Surrender," he echoed, the word a soft caress. "A dangerous word, Miss Vance." "Or a beautiful one," she countered, emboldened by the sherry and the potent atmosphere. He smiled then, a slow, sensual unfolding that transformed his austere features, making him breathtakingly handsome. "Indeed. Beautiful and infinitely complex." He drained his glass, then set it down with a soft click. "It is late. I have kept you from your rest." The sudden shift in topic, the abrupt return to formality, was jarring. Eleanor felt a pang of disappointment, a strange sense of loss. She had wanted the moment to continue, to unravel further, to see where this exquisite tension would lead. "It's quite all right," she said, though her voice felt heavy with regret. She stood up, feeling a little unsteady on her feet. He rose too, moving with an effortless grace. He walked with her back to her work table, watching as she gathered her tools, the silence between them now filled with a different kind of electricity. It was an unspoken farewell, yet also a lingering promise. As she put away her last needle, she felt his presence behind her, close enough that she could feel the faint warmth radiating from him. She turned, expecting him to be a few steps away, but he was right there, blocking her path, his eyes burning into hers. "Eleanor," he said, her name a low, intimate murmur on his lips. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed softly over her skin, sending a jolt of pure sensation through her. Her breath hitched. The touch was tender, yet undeniably possessive. "I find," he continued, his voice a soft rasp, his eyes never leaving hers, "that some desires are best not suppressed, especially when they whisper with such a velvet allure." His gaze dropped to her mouth, and Eleanor felt her lips part slightly, a silent invitation. The air was thick with anticipation, the world outside this library fading into insignificance. She could feel the steady beat of her own heart, thrumming a wild rhythm against her ribs. He leaned in, slowly, inexorably, his eyes still locked with hers, giving her every chance to pull away. But she didn't. She couldn't. She wanted this. His head tilted, and she could feel the warmth of his breath on her lips, the intoxicating scent of him filling her senses. Her eyelids fluttered, anticipation a searing heat in her veins. She felt a profound sense of surrender, a willing dive into the unknown. And then, his lips were almost on hers, the lightest, most exquisite brush, a feather-light promise of something more. The contact was so delicate, so fleeting, it was almost unbearable. He paused, holding that agonizing space, his thumb still caressing her cheek, his eyes dark with a potent, hungry desire that mirrored her own. The moment stretched, taut and shimmering, poised on the edge of everything. His lips finally claimed hers, not with a sudden, forceful urgency, but with a deliberate slowness that was infinitely more potent. It was a gentle press, a soft sigh of contact that seemed to melt the edges of the world. Her own lips, parted slightly in anticipation, welcomed him with an almost desperate tenderness. There was no immediate demanding passion, but a profound, almost sacred communion. It was a kiss that tasted of unspoken words, of long-held desires finally given permission to breathe. He deepened it then, ever so slightly, a soft exploratory brush of his tongue against hers, a tentative question that she answered with an immediate fervent yielding. A tremor ran through her, a delicious current that started at her mouth and spread rapidly, igniting every nerve ending. Her fingers, which had been resting lightly on his shoulders, now tangled themselves in the dark silk of his hair, pulling him closer, an instinctive gesture born of an insatiable need for more. The taste of him was intoxicating, a subtle hint of the rich wine they'd shared, an underlying warmth that was uniquely his. It was a taste she knew she would crave from this moment on. He groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated against her lips, and in that sound, she heard the mirroring of her own escalating desire. His thumb, still on her cheek, began to stroke the delicate skin just beneath her eye, a tender counterpoint to the growing intensity of their kiss. She felt herself leaning into him entirely, her body a pliant curve against his solid form. Her breasts, already sensitive, tingled against his chest, the thin silk of her dress no barrier to the delicious friction. The heat in her veins intensified, a blazing fire now, not just a flicker. She felt a profound sense of surrender, a willing dive into the unknown, but this time, the unknown was clearer, brighter, and infinitely more appealing. When he finally broke the kiss, it was only by a whisper, pulling back just enough for their breaths to mingle, for their eyes to meet in the dim, dancing firelight. His eyes, she saw, were not just dark with desire, but also with a profound tenderness, a vulnerability that disarmed her. "Beautiful," he murmured, his voice a husky whisper that seemed to caress her very soul. "You are so unbelievably beautiful." Her cheeks flushed, a warmth unrelated to the fire. She had never been called beautiful with such raw, unadulterated adoration, and it made her feel exposed, yet utterly cherished. She could only manage a small, breathless sound in response, her throat tight with emotion. His gaze dropped to her lips, swollen, reddened from their kiss, then traveled lower, lingering on the pulse throbbing at the base of her throat, before finally settling on the swell of her breasts beneath the silk. A new wave of heat washed over her, a blush that spread downwards, tingling over her skin. She felt utterly seen, utterly desired, and it was exhilarating. He didn't rush. His touch was a slow, deliberate exploration, a promise of pleasures yet to come. His hands, which had been resting on her lower back, now began to trace the delicate curve of her spine, moving upwards slowly, languidly, until they reached the nape of her neck. His fingers threaded into her hair, gently tilting her head back, offering her throat to him. And he took the offering. His lips, still warm and damp from their kiss, descended, brushing a searing path along her jawline, down to the sensitive skin of her neck. A shiver, not of cold, but of exquisite sensation, ran through her. She arched slightly, instinctively, offering more. His breath, warm against her skin, sent delicious goosebumps across her arms. He kissed the hollow of her throat, a soft, open-mouthed kiss that made her knees feel weak. "You smell intoxicating," he whispered, his voice muffled against her skin, a low rumble that vibrated through her chest. "Like jasmine and something wild." She closed her eyes, letting the sensations wash over her. Her hands had migrated from his hair to his broad shoulders, gripping the fine fabric of his jacket. She could feel the hard planes of muscle beneath, and a delicious tremor went through her. She wanted to feel more of him, the warmth of his skin against hers. The thought was a sudden, urgent craving. He seemed to sense her unspoken desire. His hands moved from her neck, gliding down her arms, his thumbs brushing over the sensitive skin of her inner elbows, sending electric jolts through her. He took her hands in his fingers intertwining with hers, and brought them to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to each of her knuckles before turning her palms upwards and kissing the sensitive skin there. It was a gesture of such tender reverence that it brought a fresh wave of emotion to her. "Come," he murmured, his eyes holding hers, a silent question, a gentle command. She nodded, unable to speak, her breath still catching in her throat. He didn't pull her, but rather, his grip on her hands became a subtle guide. He stepped back slowly, maintaining eye contact, until she realized he was leading her towards the plush, oversized sofa nestled in the corner by the roaring fireplace. Its velvet cushions looked impossibly soft and inviting, a stark contrast to the formal elegance of the library. With a final, lingering squeeze of her hands, he released them, his gaze still holding hers as he moved to the sofa. He sat down first, sinking into the deep cushions, and then extended a hand to her, an unspoken invitation. She hesitated for only a fraction of a second, her heart hammering against her ribs, before taking his offered hand. His grip was firm, warm, and reassuring. She sat beside him, the plush velvet cool against her exposed arms, but the warmth radiating from his body was immediate and encompassing. He didn't pull her into an immediate embrace, but rather turned slightly towards her, his arm resting along the back of the sofa, his fingers lightly brushing her hair. The intimacy of the gesture, the quiet closeness, was almost more powerful than the more overtly passionate touches. "Are you comfortable?" he asked, his voice soft, his gaze searching hers. She nodded again, a small smile playing on her lips. "More than comfortable." He smiled in return, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that made her stomach flutter. "Good." His fingers, which had been resting on her hair, now began to gently thread through it, lifting a lock, letting it drift through his fingers. The sensation was exquisite, a light, teasing touch that promised deeper intimacy. The fire crackled merrily, casting long dancing shadows across the room, illuminating the spines of ancient books, the rich mahogany, the intricate patterns on the Persian rug. The world outside the library felt distant, irrelevant. Here, in this cocoon of warmth and desire, only they existed. He leaned closer, his eyes still fixed on hers, and she could feel the warmth of his breath on her cheek. "I've wanted to do this," he began, his voice a low rumble, "since the moment I saw you." Her breath hitched. The honesty, the directness of his admission, was disarming. I felt it too," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "There was something about you." His smile deepened, a knowing, triumphant gleam in his eyes. "Something magnetic?" "Irresistible," she corrected, her gaze dropping to his lips, remembering the exquisite taste of him. He chuckled, a low, rich sound that sent a shiver down her spine. Irresistible indeed. His fingers left her hair, moving down to her collarbone, tracing the delicate line just above the silk of her dress. Each touch was feather-light, yet it left a trail of fire in its wake. He paused, his thumb brushing over the small pearl button at the base of her throat. Her heart began to pound with renewed intensity. She knew what he was asking, what he was offering. It was a silent question, yet it screamed through the quiet room. Her eyes met his, and she saw the question reflected there, along with a deep, patient hunger. She raised her hand, her fingers trembling slightly, and covered his hand with hers. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please." A spark ignited in his eyes, a flare of triumphant passion. His fingers, emboldened by her permission, began to unfasten the tiny pearl buttons, one by one. Each click of the pearl leaving its delicate casing was a small declaration, a gentle unveiling. She felt the cool air kiss her skin as the silk parted, revealing the curve of her collarbone, the delicate swell of her chest. He worked slowly, deliberately, his gaze fixed on his task, or perhaps on the skin that was slowly being revealed. When the last button was undone, he didn't pull the fabric open. Instead, his fingers slipped beneath the silk, tracing the delicate lace edge of her chemise just above the curve of her breast. A gasp escaped her lips, a soft, involuntary sound. His touch was so light, so knowing, it sent shivers through her entire body. He leaned in again, his lips brushing her ear. "You are exquisite," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Every inch of you." Then he gently pushed the silk from her shoulders, letting the fabric fall away, pooling around her waist like a shimmering cloud. She was left in her delicate lace chemise, its thin straps clinging to her shoulders, the soft lace hinting at the curves beneath. The firelight caught the lace, making it glow, and casting warm shadows on her skin. He gazed at her, his eyes dark with a potent, hungry admiration that made her feel both vulnerable and incredibly powerful. She felt a flush spread across her chest, a heat that had nothing to do with the fire. Her hands, which had been resting on her lap, now lifted, almost instinctively, to cup his face. Her thumbs stroked his strong jawline, feeling the slight stubble that was beginning to emerge. His lips found hers again, this time with a deep, consuming hunger. It was a kiss that devoured, that claimed, that left her breathless and yearning for more. His tongue plunged, seeking, exploring, and hers met it with an equal fervor, a dance of pure, unadulterated passion. Her senses reeled, intoxicated by his taste, his scent, the feel of his lips on hers. One of his hands, no longer constrained by her dress, slid around her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. Her bare arm, freed from the silk, pressed against his jacket, the rough wool a sensual contrast to her bared skin. The other hand, which had been tracing the lace of her chemise, now moved to her back, finding the delicate clasp that held it together. She felt the cool metal against her skin, then the soft click as he unfastened it. The chemise, now freed, sagged slightly, hinting at the full reveal. He paused, his breath ragged against her lips, his eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, meeting hers. The unspoken question was there again, in the depths of his gaze. "Are you sure?" "When?" Her answer was not in words, but in the way she arched into him, pressing her breasts against his chest, in the way her fingers dug into the hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer still. She wanted this, with every fiber of her being. With a low groan, he allowed the chemise to fall, letting it pool with the silk dress around her waist. Her breasts, full and exquisitely sensitive, were now exposed to the warm, flickering light of the fire. A soft gasp escaped her lips as the air hit them, followed by an immediate rush of heat, as his gaze dropped, lingering. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and cupped one of her breasts, his thumb brushing over the hardened peak. An electric current shot through her, a powerful jolt that made her cry out softly. Her head fell back against the sofa, her eyes closing as she savored the exquisite sensation. His touch was both gentle and firm, exploring the weight and curve of her. "My God," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion, "you are magnificent." She opened her eyes, meeting his. There was reverence there, but also a burgeoning hunger that mirrored her own. He leaned down, his lips brushing over the tip of her breast, sending another wave of shivers through her. She gasped, her body arching into him, a silent plea for more. He didn't make her wait. His mouth closed over her, his tongue tracing the delicate curve, then pulling gently on the sensitive peak. A moan, deep and guttural, tore from her throat. It was an overwhelming sensation, a pure, unadulterated pleasure that made her entire body tremble. Her fingers threaded into his hair once more, holding him to her, urging him on. He suckled gently at first, then with more urgency, drawing a deep, throbbing ache low in her belly. He alternated between her breasts, teasing, laving, and suckling, until her entire chest was flushed, her nipples hard and exquisitely sensitive. She was lost in a world of pure sensation, her mind clouded by the intoxicating pleasure. His hand, which had been caressing her other breast, now slid down her belly, past the silk and lace pooled around her waist, and found the bare skin of her hip. Her breath hitched as his fingers began to trace the delicate curve, slowly, deliberately, making their way downwards. He paused, his thumb brushing against the delicate lace of her panties, a soft teasing touch that made her muscles clench. She moaned again, a soft, desperate sound, her hips instinctively tilting towards his touch. She wanted him to touch her there, to feel the heat and pressure of his hand against her most intimate parts. The ache was growing, intensifying with every stroke of his thumb, with every tug of his mouth on her breast. He seemed to understand. His fingers dipped lower, slipping beneath the lace, finding the soft, damp skin beneath. Her breath caught in her throat as his touch finally reached its destination. It was not a sudden, forceful touch, but a gentle, exploratory caress that sent a shockwave of pleasure through her. He felt warm, strong, and utterly intoxicating. He began to stroke her slowly, sensually, his fingers dancing over her sensitive flesh. Each stroke sent a jolt of fire through her, making her arch into him, her legs shifting restlessly against the velvet cushions. The pleasure was almost unbearable, a sweet, aching throb that permeated her entire being. "So wet," he murmured against her breast, his voice thick with desire. "So ready." His words, whispered against her skin, were like a potent aphrodisiac. They made her feel utterly abandoned, completely free to explore the depths of her own desire. Her hands clutched his shoulders, her nails digging gently into the fabric of his jacket as the pleasure intensified, building with each deliberate stroke of his fingers. She felt herself rising, climbing towards an unknown peak, her body humming with a desperate, delicious urgency. She wanted more, needed more. Her hips began to move rhythmically against his hand, an instinctive movement, a silent plea. He groaned, a deep, primal sound that resonated in her chest. His mouth left her breast, moving up to her neck, tracing a searing path to her ear. "Look at me," he whispered, his voice rough with passion. She opened her eyes, hazy with desire, and met his gaze. His eyes were dark, almost black, burning with a fierce, possessive hunger that made her heart pound even harder. In them, she saw a reflection of her own escalating need, her own wild surrender. He pulled back slightly, his hand still stroking her, his gaze locked with hers. "I want you," he said, his voice raw and honest. More than I've wanted anyone. Her eyes filled with a sudden overwhelming emotion. And you, she whispered, her voice choked with feeling. Oh God, I want you. With a final decisive movement, he pulled her closer, shifting his weight so that he was half lying over her, his strong thighs pressing against hers. His hand left her, only to return with a new urgency, slipping beneath the remaining layers of silk and lace, finding the heart of her desire. He pressed into her, a firm, knowing pressure that made her cry out. She felt the hard ridge of him against her thigh. A powerful, insistent presence that made her gasp. Her entire body trembled with anticipation, her muscles clenching and unclenching. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with their shared desire. He leaned down, his mouth hovering just above hers, his breath hot and ragged against her lips. Are you ready? He whispered, his eyes searching hers, a final tender confirmation. Her only answer was a desperate moan, her hips arching upwards, silently begging him to complete the delicious torment. She was more than ready. She was burning. She was utterly, irrevocably his. His lips claimed hers again, a deep, hungry kiss that consumed her very being. And then, slowly, deliberately he shifted, pressing himself against her, her body opening to him, welcoming him with a profound, aching readiness. The world narrowed to the feel of his skin against hers, the scent of him, the taste of him, the exquisite anticipation of what was to come. The fire crackled, casting their entwined forms in dancing golden light, a silent witness to their burgeoning passion, poised on the very precipice of ultimate union. The world narrowed to the feel of his skin against hers, the scent of him, the taste of him, the exquisite anticipation of what was to come. The fire crackled, casting their entwined forms in dancing golden light, a silent witness to their burgeoning passion, poised on the very precipice of ultimate union. A soft sigh escaped her lips, a sound caught somewhere between a gasp and a moan, as he pressed a little deeper, a slow, insistent pressure that promised everything. Her hips instinctively arched, meeting him, a silent plea for more, for all. He paused, his breath warm against her ear, a low rumble of sound emanating from his chest. A primal thrum that vibrated through her, settling deep in her core. It was a moment suspended in time, the exquisite agony of waiting, of wanting, of being so utterly ready to surrender. Then, with a tender, deliberate grace that stole her breath, he began to move. Slowly, so achingly slowly, he found his way home. A shiver coursed through her, not of cold, but of profound, electrifying sensation. Her eyes fluttered closed, a single tear tracing a path down her temple, a testament to the overwhelming beauty of the moment, the sheer rightness of it. Every nerve ending in her body sang, awakened to a symphony of touch, of pressure, of incredible fullness. He filled her completely, perfectly, as if she had been sculpted precisely for him, and he for her. A soft gasp escaped her, a sound of pure wonder as their bodies locked into place. He held himself still for a moment, allowing them both to adjust, to absorb the magnitude of their connection. His gaze met hers, deep and searching, filled with a tenderness that brought another rush of emotion. In his eyes, she saw not just desire, but reverence, a profound respect that made her heart ache with a love so potent, it felt like a physical force. Beautiful, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. So incredibly beautiful. She couldn't speak, could only offer a tremulous smile, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer. She wanted to feel every inch of him, to absorb him into her very being. And then, with a soft groan that seemed to tear from his very soul, he began to move. It was a slow, languid dance at first, a gentle swaying that built on the exquisite pressure, the glorious friction. Each movement was a deliberate exploration, a conversation without words, a deepening of an intimacy that transcended the physical. He watched her face, eyes devouring every subtle shift in her expression, every soft moan that escaped her lips, every arch of her back. His pace was guided by her, by the rhythm of her breath, by the slight tremors that began to ripple through her body. The firelight danced on their skin, painting them in shades of gold and shadow, highlighting the flexing muscles of his back, the gentle curve of her hip. The air grew thick with the scent of their mingled bodies, of desire and warmth, and something uniquely, intoxicatingly theirs. Her hands roamed over his shoulders, down his spine, feeling the taut strength of him, reveling in the hard planes of his body pressed against the soft curves of hers. With each slow, deliberate thrust, the pleasure intensified, building like a rising tide within her. It was a deep, aching throb that spread outwards, engulfing her, making her feel utterly alive, utterly consumed. She let go, abandoning herself to the sensations, to his touch, to the primal rhythm that now pulsed between them. Her legs wrapped around his waist, pulling him deeper still, wanting to lose herself entirely in the exquisite oblivion he offered. His movements became more urgent, more insistent, yet still infused with a profound tenderness. He kissed her, a deep, hungry kiss that tasted of fire and wine and pure, unadulterated passion. Their tongues danced, mimicking the intimate rhythm of their bodies, a wild, beautiful confluence of sensation. Her mind emptied of everything but him, of the feel of his skin, the scent of his arousal, the glorious invasion that brought her closer and closer to the edge. She could feel the storm gathering, a delicious tempest brewing deep within her. Her body began to tremble uncontrollably, a sweet, exquisite agony that threatened to overwhelm her. She cried out, a soft, choked sound, as he hit a new depth, a new intensity that sent shivers of pure delight through her. He groaned in response, a guttural sound that spoke of his own nearing climax, his own surrender. "Look at me," he rasped, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes, his own dark with passion, pupils dilated. "Let me see you." And she did. She opened her eyes, gazing into his, letting him witness her unraveling, her complete and utter capitulation to the pleasure he wrought. In that shared gaze, a lightning bolt of connection struck, a profound recognition of souls intertwining. It was more than just physical. It was spiritual, an ancient knowing that transcended time and space. Then, with a powerful final surge, he drove into her, and the world exploded. A wave of pure, unadulterated ecstasy washed over her, radiating outwards from her core, shattering her into a million glorious pieces. Her back arched, her fingers digging into his shoulders, her cry of release mingling with his own guttural roar. It was a release so profound, so all-consuming, that it left her breathless, trembling, utterly spent. He collapsed onto her, his weight a welcome comfort, his body still shuddering with the aftershocks of his own climax. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, mingling in the quiet of the room, the only sounds now the crackling of the fire and the frantic beating of their heart. He kissed her forehead, her temple, her lips, soft, reverent kisses that spoke of gratitude and awe. She lay beneath him, limbs heavy, utterly boneless, the lingering echoes of pleasure still humming through her veins. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a deep contentment she hadn't known she was capable of. It wasn't just physical satisfaction. It was an emotional balm, a homecoming. She felt seen, cherished, utterly adored. Slowly, gently, he shifted, rolling to his side but keeping her tucked against him, their legs still intimately entwined. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer until her back was pressed against his chest, her head nestled into the curve of his shoulder. He pressed a soft kiss to her hair, inhaling her scent, a soft sigh escaping his lips. "Amelia," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep and satisfaction, finally speaking her name. The sound was a caress, a private endearment that sent a fresh wave of warmth through her. "My Amelia," she smiled, a soft, secret smile, her fingers tracing the strong line of his arm. "Julian," she whispered back, the name a sweet melody on her tongue. It felt right, natural, as if their names had always belonged together, spoken in the intimate quiet of a firelit room. The fire continued to cast its golden glow, a silent companion to their shared stillness. The air cooled slightly, but they remained wrapped in the warmth of their bodies, in the lingering heat of their passion. Amelia felt herself drifting, suspended in a delicious liminal space between wakefulness and sleep, a profound sense of safety enveloping her. She had never felt so utterly secure, so utterly in theirs. Julian's breath was soft against her neck, a steady rhythm that lulled her. She felt the gentle rise and fall of his chest against her back, the strong beat of his heart echoing against her own. Every nerve ending, once alight with frantic pleasure, now hummed with a deep, peaceful satisfaction. It was a feeling of being utterly complete, as if a missing piece of her soul had finally found its rightful place. She stirred slightly, turning her head to press a soft kiss to his bicep, a silent gesture of her profound gratitude. He tightened his arm around her in response, pulling her even closer, a soft, contented groan rumbling in his chest. "Rest, my love," he whispered, his voice a low, soothing murmur that promised protection and devotion. Amelia closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink deeper into the embrace, into the luxurious afterglow. The world outside the cabin, with its worries and demands, felt impossibly distant, a forgotten dream. Here, in Julian's arms by the dancing firelight, she was home. Sleep claimed her gently, a deep, dreamless slumber, born of profound contentment. Wingea. She awoke slowly, not to an alarm or the harsh light of morning, but to the gentle caress of fingers tracing patterns on her bare skin. Her eyes fluttered open, still heavy with sleep, and she found herself still nestled against Julian's chest, the warmth of his body a comforting cocoon. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting a softer, rosy glow around the room, bathing them in a tender light. Julian's eyes, the color of warm honey, were already open, gazing down at her with an expression so tender it made her heart swell. A soft smile played on his lips as he continued to stroke her arm, his touch light, possessive, utterly loving. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice still a little rough with sleep, a delightful rasp that sent shivers down her spine. "Morning," she whispered back, her voice thick with sleep, a smile blooming on her own face. She stretched, a languid, cat-like movement, feeling gloriously uninhibited in his presence. Her body felt soft, yielding, and pleasantly sated. He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, then her nose, and finally, her lips. It was a slow, lingering kiss, full of the unspoken promise of a new day, a new beginning. There was no urgency, only a deep, abiding affection that spoke volumes. "Sleep well?" he asked, his thumb gently caressing her cheekbone. "Like a dream," she confessed, snuggling closer. "The best dream." She felt a blush creep up her neck, but there was no shame, only a profound sense of intimacy. He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated through her. "I can second that. I haven't slept so soundly in I can't remember how long." He paused, his gaze deepening. "Or felt so complete." His words struck a chord deep within her. "Complete," she echoed, the word feeling profoundly true. It was as if a puzzle piece she hadn't even known was missing had finally slotted into place. The ease between them, the natural flow of their bodies together, the profound connection that had bloomed in the firelight, it was all so new, yet felt so incredibly ancient and right. She pushed herself up slightly, propping her head on her hand, her gaze sweeping over his face. The early morning light softened the strong lines of his jaw, highlighted the slight stubble, and made his eyes seem even more captivating. He was undeniably handsome, but it was more than just his physical attractiveness that drew her in. It was the kindness in his eyes, the gentle strength of his presence, the way he made her feel utterly safe and cherished. "Julian," she said softly, her voice more serious now. "Last night. It was—" She searched for the right words, but they felt inadequate. He cut her off gently, his hand reaching up to cup her cheek. It was everything, Amelia. More than I ever dreamed of. His eyes held hers, unwavering, filled with an emotion so raw and powerful, it took her breath away. You are everything. A tear pricked at the corner of her eye, but this time it was a tear of pure joy. She leaned into his touch, her heart overflowing. And you, Julian, you are more than I ever dared to hope for. They lay there for a long moment, simply gazing at each other, allowing the unspoken emotions to wash over them. There was a quiet understanding that passed between them, a silent agreement that what had happened between them was profound, life-altering. Eventually, Julian shifted, pressing another soft kiss to her lips. As much as I'd like to stay here forever, wrapped up with you, I think we should probably get some coffee into us before the cabin gets too chilly. He gestured vaguely towards the dying embers in the fireplace. Amelia laughed, a light, joyful sound. You're right, though I wouldn't complain if we just stayed like this all day. Believe me, the temptation is strong, he admitted, a playful glint in his eyes. He slowly unwound himself from her, a reluctant sigh escaping him as their bodies separated. The sudden coolness of the air on her skin was a stark contrast to his warmth, making her miss his closeness instantly. He reached for the heavy woolen blanket they had discarded earlier, pulling it over her with a gentle tenderness. Stay warm, my love. I'll get the fire going again and make us some breakfast. Amelia watched him, a profound sense of gratitude filling her. He moved with an easy grace, his body a symphony of lean muscle and quiet strength. He stoked the embers, adding fresh logs, and soon the fire was roaring back to life, casting golden warmth throughout the cabin. The scent of pine and wood smoke began to fill the air, mingling with the subtle, lingering scent of their lovemaking. While he worked on the fire, Amelia pulled on a soft oversized sweater she found draped over a chair, its woolly warmth a comforting embrace. She watched him move about the small kitchen area, gathering ingredients, the quiet clatter of pots and pans a soothing backdrop to the morning. He seemed perfectly at home here, perfectly at ease, and that ease extended to her, wrapping her in a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she'd been craving. He was humming a low, tuneless melody as he cracked eggs into a bowl, and Amelia felt her heart melt a little more. It was the small, ordinary moments like these, infused with the extraordinary intimacy they now shared, that made everything feel so incredibly special. Anything I can do to help? She offered, though she was perfectly content to simply watch him. He glanced over his shoulder, a warm smile gracing his lips. Just be beautiful, my love, and perhaps keep me company. She chuckled, a warmth spreading through her chest. She rose from the bed, padding softly towards him, the sweater falling to mid-thigh, leaving her legs bare. She leaned against the counter beside him, watching his capable hands at work. What are you making? She asked, inhaling the tantalizing scent of sizzling bacon. Just some scrambled eggs, bacon and toast, he replied, flipping the bacon with practiced ease. Simple, but hearty. We'll need our strength for whatever adventures the day holds. He winked at her, and she felt a blush creep up her neck again. The adventures. She hadn't even thought beyond the immediate bubble of their shared warmth. What did the day hold? What did their future hold? The question, once daunting, now felt exciting, brimming with possibility. Julian, she said softly, her voice more serious now. This, us, what does this mean? He paused, turning from the stove to face her fully, his hands resting on the counter. His gaze was earnest, direct, and utterly sincere. It means everything, Amelia. It means a beginning. I don't know what exactly it will look like or where we go from here, but I know this. I've never felt anything like this before, with anyone, and I don't want it to end. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers, his thumbs stroking the back of her hand gently. I want to explore this, Amelia. Every facet of it. I want to know everything about you, spend every moment I can with you, if you'll let me. Her heart swelled, threatening to burst. This was it. The affirmation she hadn't consciously realized she'd been waiting for. It wasn't just a night of passion. It was the foundation of something real, something profound. Yes, she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, Julian. I want that too, more than anything. He smiled, a genuine radiant smile that lit up his entire face. He leaned in, pressing a soft, chaste kiss to her lips, a promise in the gentle pressure. Good. Now how about we actually get some food in us? I'm ravenous. They ate together, sitting at a small wooden table by the window, the morning light streaming in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The food was simple but delicious, and they ate in a comfortable silence, punctuated by soft murmurs and shared glances. The easy intimacy between them felt natural, as if they had been doing this for years. After breakfast, Julian insisted on washing the dishes, shooing her away with a playful swat on her bottom when she tried to help. Amelia retreated to the small living area, curling up on the plush rug in front of the now roaring fire, enjoying the warmth and the quiet domesticity of the scene. She watched him from her spot on the rug, the way the muscles in his back flexed as he reached for a plate, the gentle focus in his eyes. He was a man of quiet strength, of profound tenderness, and an unexpected depth that she was only just beginning to uncover. And he was hers. The thought made a thrill run through her. When he finished, he joined her by the fire, settling down beside her, his arm naturally finding its way around her shoulders, pulling her into his side. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling utterly content. So, he began, his voice thoughtful. What are your plans for the day, Amelia? Or for the rest of this trip, for that matter? Amelia had come to this remote cabin for a much-needed escape, a chance to clear her head from the pressures of her demanding job in the city. She had envisioned days of quiet reflection, long walks in the crisp autumn air, and perhaps some reading. She certainly hadn't envisioned Julian, or this profound connection. I hadn't really made any solid plans, she admitted, looking up at him. Just to relax, breathe, and figure things out. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. And have you figured anything out? He asked gently, his thumb stroking her arm. She smiled, a soft, knowing smile. I think I have. I think I've figured out that figuring things out can be a lot more enjoyable with company. She paused, then added, Your company? He chuckled, a warm, resonant sound. Good. Because I was hoping to convince you to extend your stay, or at least let me extend mine. He paused, then continued, a more serious tone entering his voice. I wasn't expecting to meet anyone here. I came for a similar reason. To get away, to clear my head. To think about my future. He ran a hand through his hair, a small, self-conscious gesture. I've been at a crossroads professionally for a while now. Amelia listened intently, a deep empathy blooming in her chest. She knew that feeling, the weight of uncertainty about one's path. A crossroads? She prompted gently. Yes, a big one. I've been running my own architectural firm for 10 years now, and while it's been successful, I felt a growing sense of dissatisfaction. A desire for something more, something different. I've been contemplating a major shift, maybe even selling the business and pursuing something entirely new. Something more aligned with my soul, I suppose. He looked at her, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. It's a terrifying prospect, stepping into the unknown. It sounds like a brave one, Amelia offered, squeezing his hand. To chase what truly resonates with your soul. Not many people dare to do that. And you? He asked, turning the question back to her. What about your work? What do you do, Amelia, when you're not escaping to remote cabins? I am a marketing consultant, she replied, a slight grimace on her face. It's stimulating, demanding, pays the bills, but it doesn't exactly set my soul on fire either. She sighed. Sometimes I feel like I'm just constantly chasing the next deadline, the next client, the next big win, and I lose sight of us, memory. He nodded slowly, a shared understanding passing between them. The hamster wheel, as they call it. Precisely, she agreed. So yes, this trip was meant to be a reset. A chance to figure out if I even want to stay on that wheel, or if there's a different path for me too. Perhaps, Julian mused, his gaze drifting towards the fire. We're both standing at similar crossroads, and perhaps we found each other just when we needed to. He turned his head, his eyes meeting hers, a profound softness in their depths. To navigate the unknown together. The idea, once unfathomable, now felt exhilarating. The thought of facing the future, with all its uncertainties, with Julian by her side, filled her with a sense of courage and excitement she hadn't known she possessed. "I like the sound of that," she whispered, her heart brimming with hope. He smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile. "Me too. So if your plans were flexible, Amelia, how would you feel about spending the rest of the day, and perhaps the rest of the week, exploring this beautiful wilderness together? And perhaps exploring us?" Amelia didn't hesitate. "I think that sounds absolutely perfect, Julian." He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, a soft, tender kiss that was both a promise and a gentle question. "Good. Because I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our story." He deepened the kiss then, a slow, sensual exploration that ignited a fresh spark of desire within her. The morning light streamed through the window, painting them in warm hues, as the fire continued to crackle a gentle rhythm, a quiet witness to their burgeoning future. The cabin, once a solitary refuge, now felt like a haven, a sanctuary for two souls who had unexpectedly found their way home to each other. The world outside waited, but for now they were content in their shared warmth, their intertwined destinies, and the thrilling promise of what lay ahead. The journey was just beginning, and Amelia, with Julian by her side, felt ready for anything. The journey was just beginning, and Amelia, with Julian by her side, felt ready for anything. He tightened his embrace, his lips finding the soft curve of her neck, sending shivers that were less from the chill and more from the exquisite thrill of his touch. A soft sigh escaped her, a silent invitation he was quick to accept, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw before tilting her chin up. Their eyes met, a silent conversation passing between them, a deep understanding, a shared longing that transcended words. As their lips finally met, a slow, tender claim, the world outside dissolved, leaving only the warmth of the fire, the scent of pine, and the undeniable pull of two souls, finally finding their perfect alignment. In this quiet sanctuary, under the watchful gaze of the flickering flames, they began to weave the first threads of their shared tapestry, a promise whispered in every breath, every touch, every beat of their now harmonized hearts.